it's difficult because, you go, it's like walking a tightrope. And I think Sheryl Sandberg says that in Lean In. It's like a tightrope. And I think speaking while female is like a tightrope. You go a little too far one way and, you're too quiet, you're demure, and that comes off as you don't know what you're talking about, right? You need someone to lead you and guide you. But you go a little too far the other way and you're abrasive, or you're just a bitch, or you think you know everything, or you're pushing things in our faces. And it's a difficult dance. I say speaking while female is like walking a tightrope backwards in heels.
Tells a story so bold. She's a warrior rising, her spirit pure gold.
Hi again, welcome back to Anna Wilding Unstoppable. I have an incredible guest today, a powerful woman who I have got to know over the last year or two. She's just written a bestseller. Her name is Jessica Doyle Mekkes, and her book is called I'm Speaking, published by Rowman Littlefield. And welcome to the studio, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
That's wonderful. Now, Jessica, I will point out, is also the head of the musical theatre department at the University of which?
At East Carolina University.
Carolina University, and she's often playing great clips and snippets of her students in training, which is absolutely wonderful. But we're here today, really, Jessica, to talk about your book, I'm Speaking, which is heavily geared, I think, to the female market. And we're going to talk about the power of the woman's voice and what is really happening with women today as we're in 2025, the progress, the lack of progress. And why did you write this book? What compelled you to write this book?
Sure. So I was inspired to write the book really by the women in my life. I am so blessed to be surrounded with friends and family and colleagues who are professional and extraordinary women doing extraordinary work in their chosen fields. And what I was finding was through mostly just casual conversation that a lot of these women were feeling like they didn't have the skills to speak up when they needed to, that they could speak very confidently, they could talk shop very confidently in their chosen profession. But when it came time to address, let's say, toxicity in the workplace, when it came time to perhaps pitch funding for their startup, if it came time to talk to their supervisor because they were being mistreated or taken advantage of, they didn't have the skill set to do that. And it was just over coffee. They were sharing this with me, and I am a vocal coach. I work with women who come to me usually because there's something that they don't like about their voice, or at some point in their life, someone has told them that there's something wrong with the way that they speak. And as you mentioned, Anna, I'm also an actor. I had a theater program, and so we deal a lot with performance anxiety. And so that's really where the idea came from, is I thought, there seems to be a disconnect in books, in the literature, between books that are on public speaking and books that are on female empowerment. But very little crossover. There was very little how to use your voice to empower yourself, how to have those conversations confidently and clearly. And so I thought, well, it doesn't seem like there's a book on this, so I wrote one.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. And I agree with you. There's definitely space in the marketplace. And obviously, I come from a global perspective. I am a dual citizen. I am very proud to call America home. But I think around the world, women are still struggling with the notion, certainly in our generation and the generations ahead of us and the generations coming up behind us, we've moved on a bit from women should be seen and not heard, but there is still an undercurrent of that. I think in all conversations, all global conversations, board conversations, especially when women are pitching businesses, I have sat in meetings with men who can make a great difference to this 2% of women who get VC funding. It is really that low. Only 2% of women in 2025 around the world are able to get VC funding. And you sit in a room with these billionaires and they just stare at you like, wow, who's this woman talking that I'm not having sex with? Or why is a woman talking when really women should be at the home or still having sex? And one of the big problems in the banking and investment industry, I'm making you laugh, but it's true. And one of the big problems in the banking and investment industry, especially in the older generation, is they have wives who never worked. And suddenly these women come to them and say, I want to run this company. And this is how I'm going to do it. And it doesn't matter whether a woman comes from science, whether they're in the Air Force, whether they're fighter pilots, whether they're astronauts, whether they're artists, there is still this sense, and especially the movie business, which is still really bad, there's still this double take that goes on in men's expressions. It's really quite hilarious now. I've been told twice that we do not fund women, and I went twice to banks with very successful businesses in my life, once in London and once in Australia and New Zealand. Excellent books. Walked in with accountants. The London accountant represented Liz Hurley, Emma Thompson, everyone you could possibly believe. I had $5 million worth of contracts signed between the United States and the UK for productions. And the banker, I think it was Lloyd's Bank, sat and looked at my accountant, didn't look at me, looked at my accountant and said, we don't fund women in business. And my accountant said, you've got to be kidding me. This woman has more contracts than any of the men that you funded, any of my male clients that you funded, and I'm moving my clients. And he did. So yahoo him. But that was just, 20 years ago? And though it's changed a lot, I am finding, especially in the VC world, that the women working in VC firms are just emulating the patterns of their male bosses. They are still not opening the door wide for women. They are still, there's systemic bias where they're still following the trends of gender bias. And so I think your book is really important. And I would say that the next one is how to speak to men in these situations without getting inflammatory, right? Without saying, hey, I mean, you've got to treat them like little boys. It's okay. You know?
Yeah.
It's okay. We can be more than wives. You can entrust us with 50 or 100 million. We're not talking about 500,000 or $1 million. We're talking about we want a seat at the table where you are funding our projects to the size and scale that you are funding your own projects. And I have seen cases where men say, well, pigs fly, give me 100 million, right? And I'm like, and those same men, in one instance, were coming to me for advice for 6 months. They were hiring me as a consultant. And there was, and they went and used my words and went and got $100 million, right? I could not have done that, even though it was my words, right? And other cases in my business where I have seen men say, pigs fly, give me 100 million. And what do you say to, I mean, have you noticed this in your daily interactions with your life?
Yeah, I mean, I have, and I talk about it a lot in the book. I was on NPR last summer, right before, it was actually the day after Joe Biden announced that he was going to step down and that Kamala was going to run. And it was very kismet in terms of timing, because my book is called I'm Speaking, which was largely inspired by Kamala Harris, the title. And it just so happened that I was on A1 talking about gender and the voice and how our gender really determines how we're heard. And one of the things I said there, I was quoting Alyssa Bassist, who's a wonderful comedian and author. And in her book, Hysterical, she says that something about, and I'm going to get the quote wrong, was something about Margaret Thatcher saying like, I have to speak like I have a penis and a cold. Meaning, like I have to lower my voice.
Well, you do. Yeah, I have to.
Yeah, like we have a penis and a cold. That I was the woman who said penis on NPR, but that's I'm proud of it. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's difficult because, it's like walking a tightrope. And I think Sheryl Sandberg says that in Lean In. It's like a tightrope. And I think speaking while female is like a tightrope. You go a little too far one way and, you're too quiet, you're demure, and that comes off as you don't know what you're talking about, right? You need someone to lead you and guide you. But you go a little too far the other way and you're abrasive, or you're just a bitch, or you think you know everything, or you're pushing things in our faces. And it's a difficult dance. I say speaking while female is like walking a tightrope backwards in heels. It's like, which I'm a musical theater person, and that's a Rent the musical reference. But I really do think it is. It's hard because you have to get your point across, but in a way that people are going to listen to you. And the reality is that we often think about the words that we say, but we don't often think about how we're going to say them. And it's the how that really makes the difference. And think of the last argument you had with your partner. And I know for me, it's that tone, right? As soon as that tone of voice changes, as soon as those consonants become harder and the volume rises and that tone gets sharper, he could be telling me that we won the lottery and I wouldn't care because I'm not listening, right? Because I'm already going on the defensive. And navigating that, particularly when you're being spoken over or you're being ignored or you're having your words, like you said, Anna, having your words taken, and not given credit and being used to make somebody $100 million, which I haven't personally had that happen, but, I'm sure it will at some point. But that's really hard because our initial response as humans is to get up on our soapbox and to really go at them. My husband says my initial response is that my Wolverine claws come out, right? And as soon as that happens, the person we're talking to is no longer listening to us because they're just defending themselves, right? They're just reacting to our tone of voice. And so I think that as women, that is difficult. And it's also a reality that we have to think about the way that we speak as much as the words that we say. And I think also that stereotypes of what power sounds like and looks like exist. I think they're real. Usually they're very white and very male. And for women, it's a different thing. And we see that in the media all the time. And we hear it all the time that when a man sucks the air out of a room, he's a leader. And when a woman does it, she's a bitch. And I think that is something that is slowly changing, but I think it's also a reality of the world that we live in.
I think woman and tone is really important. I think that comes up with a lot of men and women. Women are quick to adopt a tone, right? And I do think that happens, again, cross-culturally in all cultures, because it's been our way of being heard and seen. When we can't just talk like ourselves, we have learned, I think, through generations to adopt a tone. And, it can range from obstinate silence, I think, in some cultures. They talk about the Asian silence with a lot of Asian women, to a clacking tone, to a sharp tone, to a lot of different tones, whereas men seem to be, they yell or they speak, right? And somewhere in there, I think we do have to learn to understand our tone when we are feeling or have to go on the defensive or feel that we're not being heard. I totally agree with that. And also another thing, I want to come back to these VC firms and talking to investors and bankers. It's really interesting. I did a pitch deck recently, and it is a large pitch deck in terms of I am going for a significant amount of money. And I finally sent it out a week ago. I had meetings in New York, and the comment was that I'd gone over and above what was needed in a pitch deck. I drilled down on a lot of details that aren't usually in a pitch deck. It was a little bit longer, but I said, well, here's the thing, guys. If I'd just given you a shallow 8 to 10 page pitch deck, as I'm a woman, you would have told me that I didn't know what I was talking about. So I feel that I had to go above and beyond and show my experience and depth in the industries that I'm seeking funding for. And they're like, no, no. And then they're like, yes, yes. Because
at least they're honest.
that is the reality, right? Which is a different conversation. I know, women going above and beyond and doing more than men in the workplace. But I think it's all part of the same thing. And women really only generations, it's been the last 150, 200 years that we're really starting to step out. And I still feel the generation coming up, I'm glad they're not worrying about some of the things that we worry about. But at the same time, I do think that women's history is being erased. At a certain level, that we're not focused on the incredible achievements of women in the last 200 years. I think that it is in danger of being wiped a little bit. And I think it's really important that women tell her story, that women tell their history. I know that I felt, especially in the film industry, that some people tried to eradicate some of my history, which was significant, right? It was absolutely significant. It was groundbreaking, some of my work at its time. And I think this happens across all professions.
Yes, I would agree. I think, too, that it's interesting because when we look at my background, which is the voice, it's interesting that for a generation of women, and I would include us and then the generations coming up after us, it's interesting that we are perhaps the most empowered and an active generation of women ever. And yet it's also, our voices are critiqued more than ever before. The way we, speaking with vocal fry, or that idea of having a little bit of roughness, which is really natural for so many women, is often called unprofessional. It makes you sound unprofessional or unhireable, or shrill, right? Hillary Clinton and the campaign of shrill and all of these things. And my thought on it is it's like being on the playground. It's so much easier to make fun of the way Jane sounds than it is to have a research-based answer to her question, right?
And actually listen to what she's saying, right?
Yeah. So it is not shocking to me that this generation of women who are so knowledgeable and professional and empowered and creating all these changes are also the most critiqued in terms of the way that they sound.
Right. And I think social media is really dangerous. There seems to be a trend for knocking successful women down, whether it's, again, in any profession. I think it's happened to all of us. It's just there seems to be a movement to tear and shred people down who are successful. They can be politicians, again, they can be, I know it's happened to some female Air Force pilots lately. It's happened to scientists. It's happened to people with PhDs. I mean, lawyers. It's happened to everyone. And, having been the only woman in a room a lot of the time, men can be aggressive with each other. They are very competitive. They are very ambitious, but they don't personally tear each other down. They leave it in the boardroom. They don't start making personal comments and attack women for everything under the sun. And I think that trend needs to change. And the only way that is going to change is for women to bravely talk about it. And of course, we're going to be knocked down again. And it's not right. It's not fair. It is painful. But it's unjust. And how do we stop that trend of, women being torn down? Men need to understand that there's two people on the playing field. I look at shows like Shark Tank. They do a very good job of being very even-handed with women and men. Women are listened to, men are listened to. I think that's a great example of this world involves two groups of people. Some will say 3 and 4 if you want to get into gender politics and things like that. But it needn't be this aggression towards women. And shows like Shark Tank are incredibly popular. Shows like, The Voice and Britain's Got Talent and America's Got Talent are incredibly popular. And you have to look at that and go, well, there is hope because these shows are very even-handed. And you have to look at the internet and go, well, You guys aren't that popular for what you're doing in 2025. It doesn't really make sense. And I think it's a great step forward when you see really good populist shows emulating real life. And Jessica, I want everyone to come and get your book. Again, it's called I'm Speaking, and it's on a bestseller list, and it's up at Amazon. And where else can people buy it?
Everywhere. I mean, everywhere books are sold, but mostly Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it's in libraries nationwide. And it's called, yes, I'm Speaking, Every Woman's Guide to Using Your Voice, Finding Your Voice, and Using It Fearlessly.
Right. And you've been speaking at conferences. I know we both speak publicly and things like that. So has that been an empowering process for you?
It has. It's been wonderful. I think there's a different kind of energy when you walk into a room full of hundreds of women, and that coming back at you. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you, everyone. Come and join our next episode. And we welcome you. If you have any comments, write in. Any suggestions, write in. And we'll definitely give you links to where you can buy Jessica's book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.